So, people have been looking for an update on what it's been like to have the Ford Maverick for the last couple of years. And while there's been some good parts to it, there's definitely been a few bad parts to it. And we're going to talk about some of those bad parts today in the form of recalls. So, we have recall, 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 parts available for the vehicle because it takes so long for them to get in that in my daily struggle to keep up with all these recalls, they don't often have the parts. Here's another recall. This one's for airbags. Here's another recall. You may not be able to start your engine. And another recall, side airbag curtain replacement. So these are only a small number of the recalls I've been having over the last few years. So basically, it's been an ongoing joke. Every time I check the mail, I need my new recall. It's been nonstop. The recalls are for considerably serious things. There's not been a no drive order on the truck yet, but there has been the craziest amount of recalls. I'm going to get into a little bit about exactly what these recalls were for. And yeah, so stay tuned and we'll go over that. Hi guys, so what we're talking about today is we are going to be talking about the recalls that have happened on the Ford Maverick since I've had it. It's been recall after recall, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the recalls were. So there were a ton of recalls, and I mean like I think there were like 15, 12 or something that I got personally, and they're for everything. So it's just a little bit about the experience of the truck. This isn't a full review because there is so much to talk about with the recalls. I could talk about that alone. So we're going to talk about what the recalls were for and whether or not you think it's a big deal or not. None of the recalls required the truck to stop being driven. So there's that. So for example, what's the issue here? The turn signal. The first issue is that the turn signal system may not notify the driver when a light bulb has failed. So that means basically that your turn signal could be off and you won't even know about it. That's awesome. What's the next one? The instrument panel may not illuminate warning lights or gauges. So you may not get important information on your dash that there's an error. So that's another one that's a little bit concerning. See, those types of things aren't as concerning with a new truck because you don't expect those warnings to be on. But that's the whole point of the warning system. You don't know when they're going to come on. So while it is kind of minor, it's also not, because when you need it, you need it. And there's no other way to know, right? This one I don't really like. So this recall here is one of the bigger ones for me. So the engine could fail prematurely. In the event of engine failure, significant quantities of engine oil or fuel vapor may be released under the hood and may accumulate near ignition sources. Engine failure is expected to produce loud noises, metal-to-metal clanks. Engine failure could also result in reduction of available power. So I don't really like vapor accumulating near ignition sources, or engine oil being released under the hood at all. So that's kind of major. What's the next one? This is the same one. So the first one was May 8th, 2024. This is July 7th, 2023. Sorry. I thought the dates were similar, but they're a year apart. So it's the exact same thing. There was another recall for the exact same oil leakage, fuel vapor release. So next one, body control module has been improperly calibrated and will falsely detect a current overload by one or both tail amp circuits. If this occurs, both rear tail amps may stop functioning. So in dark conditions, it may result in a crash. Basically, your rear tail lights might not light up. Next, side curtain airbags on your vehicle may not meet performance requirements of the ejection mitigation requirements. So the vehicle may not comply with, and it's a long thing that it may not comply with, and the result basically is injury in a crash. And we got the exact same one from about a year about 6 months before the exact same airbag one. So the recalls are happening in duplicate. What's this one? This may result in the inability to start the vehicle. So it's possible your 12-volt battery connection may become loose, resulting in a no start condition. I have had no start conditions, but I think it's for a different reason. We'll talk about that. This is just an uncompleted safety call reminder, and I wanted to bring this up, even though this isn't another recall. I've had a lot of recalls. At the start, when I was getting them, I went in, like I got recalls, like, oh God, I'll go in right now. So I go in, they're like, oh, those parts aren't in, we have to order them. It was so many months between when I notified them that I needed like recall parts and they contacted me back. I got incomplete recall notices. And basically it's saying, you have to get these done, or you might lose out on the ability to have it done for free. Well, it's not my fault. The dealership's not getting back to me about the parts. I'm not blaming the dealership either. I don't know what's going on their end. But, the fact that it's resulting in additional mail when I already have a dozen pending. The point of all that is it's basically become overwhelming and not really possible for me to keep track of. When you have a dozen and they're all for different things, and I'm calling in and they're like, okay, well, we have parts for some and not for others, you start to lose track. And really, it got to the point where when I was going in for oil changes, they're like, okay, we'll do the safety recalls that we're able to do now based on the parts we have. And it's like, that's great. I don't know what's outstanding. I don't know if my engine's going to randomly catch on fire or if my taillights are just not going to light up. I don't know which recalls are even outstanding. And yeah, we could sit down and go through list by list of all of them, and I could cross-reference with what recalls I have left, but let's talk about the time and the realism of that. That's a lot of keeping track of this. It's a lot of recalls, and it's a pain in the butt. I wanted to circle back to this 12-volt battery one. This may or may not be related to the battery, and this might be the topic of another conversation, but one of the biggest issues I had with the truck was regarding the battery. So I was getting warnings on my app that the truck was going into a sleep state to conserve the battery. Basically, that happens when your battery's really low, the truck knows it's going to die, it tries to save it. I was getting those messages in the middle of the night. And when I woke up in the morning to deal with it, because I'm not dealing with it at 2 a.m., it's not even waking me up, the truck was already dead. So there was something seriously wrong going on with the battery. It resulted in me having to boost the battery 4 times. I had to buy a booster because I don't have any way of boosting it when I'm on the go. And I brought it into the shop. They had a look at it the first time and said there's no problem with the battery. They checked the battery's perfectly healthy. They said they don't know why it's telling me it's going into the sleep state. And it's like, that's not a resolution. This is a new truck. It's only a couple years old. I do not want the battery to die ever. We're not talking about the dead of winter. We're talking about random days of 10 degrees, whatever. The temperatures are normal. The battery should not be dying. Anyway, this happened after the 4th or 5th time I brought it in and said, yeah, this has to be fixed. They said that they tested the battery and the battery failed the test, and they gave me a new 12-volt battery, and it never happened again. I don't know if that's related to a loose connection, related to this recall, what it is, but it's still concerning regardless. When you have a new truck, it dies 4 or 5 times. I travel with my truck across the province. It is really concerning that I could wake up in the morning and the truck be dead. Like I'm hours from home. It's a pain, right? I'm not going to be stranded, whatever, but that's not something you want to deal with a new truck. And that's what this is talking about. You're buying a new Ford Maverick, or you're thinking about it. These are things you need to consider. If you go on the forums, which I did when the battery started dying, because I didn't know if it was like the app draining the battery, and people said, yes, absolutely. It's probably, you shouldn't turn your app on because the app will do something to the truck, trigger, wake it up, and then that'll drain your battery. So a lot of people were saying, don't run the app. Why do you have an app? You can't, the solution to a problem can't be don't run an app. And when I talked to that, even with the people at the Ford dealership, they said it is possible that will work. They don't know. That's not a good solution. This was back when they didn't have a solution. you need to have a solution. So when I tell you my battery's dying, I do expect it to be replaced or fixed. And I don't know, so don't cut it. You can do a battery test and say, hey, the battery's coming back fine. That's great. Then it's not the battery. Maybe it is this recall. Maybe there's a loose connection. Find the problem. Because I'm telling you, after 4 or 5 times, it's not just a one-off. My battery's never been dead. The truck's never sat for more than, say, 5 days. Should be able to leave your vehicle for a month and the battery not go dead in the summer, even in the winter. So that was just something to think about. Like I said, this isn't a full review of the truck. That will be coming. This is just talking about the recalls. There are some serious recalls on this Ford Maverick. It's a brand new truck when I got it. I got the first generation. They got a lot of kinks to work out. Whether or not you want to deal with those kinks is up to you. None of them really besides the dead battery, resulted in any effect in my driving. But once again, I could have been driving with my taillights out. I don't know. If you're the type of person who gets really concerned about things like fuel vapor under your hood, that's probably going to make you nervous. I didn't really, whatever. For the number of under hood fires you see in real life, you know the statistics. I'm kind of a math person, so that stuff doesn't bother me. Still shouldn't be happening. Overall, I would still tell you I would recommend this truck. There is no truck in the world cheaper to buy and cheaper to operate. So none of these recalls cost me a cent. I should say that. None of the repairs of any type cost me a cent. As long as you're okay with a short 4.5-foot bed, this is still the truck to buy. You will have to have it in the shop. You can get a lot of these recalls done while you get an oil change. So there's that. It's still the truck to buy, but it is not a perfectly smooth experience. So let's get that out of the way. It's not. There's been some issues. Overall, it still has been great. It still pulls what I need it to pull. And for a small bed truck, it is awesome. So thanks for joining. Glad I could talk to you about the recalls. And join me next time when I do a full review on having this truck for a few years. Thanks.